Gentleman yields. I think we've covered everyone. Mr. Ranking Member, you're recognized for a closing statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to associate myself with Mr. Garcia's statement. I can't believe that we would send somebody or anyone from our country somewhere else and say, well, we cut off all communication. We're a better country than that. And I just thank Mr. Garcia for raising that question.
What you are about to hear from Ranking Member Bennie Thompson during Kristi Noem's DHS hearing wasn't some routine closing statement. It wasn't grandstanding. It wasn't even partisan fire-breathing. It was an indictment. An indictment of power without accountability. An indictment of a department that swore an oath to the Constitution and then treated it like optional reading.
Secretary Noem, at the start of this hearing, you stood here and took an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Then you sat down and dodged the truth over and over and over for a little more than 3 hours, so help you God. You repeatedly testified that you and the Department of Homeland Security will follow the Constitution, the laws, and the order of the Supreme Court. Well, the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution says that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And yet, a federal court found that the Department of Homeland Security, under your watch, believes that it has a right to stash away residents of this country in foreign prisons without the semblance of due process. So you did not tell the truth to this committee today when you said you would follow the Constitution and comply with due process. You also testified that you follow orders of the Supreme Court of the United States and all courts. But the Supreme Court unanimously directed the government to facilitate the return of Kilmar Garcia to the United States. But you just testified before this committee that Kilmar Garcia will never return to the United States. So you didn't tell the truth to this committee again when you said that you comply with court orders and decisions. You've overseen the deportation of U.S. citizen children and have claimed that their parents chose to take their children with them. But you produced no evidence that the mother, let alone both parents of those children, freely gave consent to have their children deported from the United States. In fact, everyone involved in those cases say that the mothers, in fact, did not want their children, especially their sick American children, deported. In fact, your agency lured families to ICE appointments under false pretenses, lied to them, refused to let them speak with an attorney or children's father, and deported them before a court had time to even hear the case. You've given yourself the unilateral right to deport anyone you deem a threat. You refuse to comply with court orders that try to stop you. That puts all of us at risk. Beyond your false testimony about the administration's deportation policies, you falsely stated that the administration is focused on a full range of DSH's missions. Instead, your budget request appears to reflect a view that DHS's sole purpose is to be a border wall construction agency that deports U.S. citizen children with cancer. Your budget proposed cuts to cybersecurity, emergency preparedness, and aviation security. Even before asking Congress for these budget cuts, you've overseen mass reductions in the workforce at CISA and FEMA. Despite repeated requests from this committee on how many people have been fired or have been bullied into quitting before their tenure, DHS has refused to share that information. So it should worry every American that we do not know how many people are left at FEMA to respond to disasters and how many cyber defenders still work at CISA as China and other adversaries attack our systems every day. And you've made clear in response to my questioning, you have no written plans for FEMA. It is very apparent that also is no plan for CISA, where you are trying to gut the agency's funding and falsely claiming that CISA is a censorship agency. Since CISA never censored anyone, but now we are all paying the price for you buying into a baseless conspiracy theory. Secretary Noem, I'm glad that you finally came to testify before this committee, but I'm disappointed, along with a lot of my Democratic colleagues, that you stood here and took an oath to tell the truth, then repeatedly failed to do so to this committee. Let me just say, if you dance with the devil long enough, he's liable to follow you home. I hope that you will stop dancing around the truth and start telling the truth so this committee can do its work, helping to defend DHS from the attacks you've launched against it. Mr. Chair.
Let's be clear about the gravity of this moment. Kristi Noem didn't wander into that hearing accidentally. She didn't stumble into oversight. She stood there, raised her right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Not a version of the truth, not a talking points truth. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And according to Thompson, what followed was more than 3 hours of ducking, dodging, and deflecting. Not confusion. Not misunderstanding. Avoidance. And when you're talking about deportations, foreign prisons, and constitutional rights, avoidance isn't harmless. It's dangerous. And this is the part that should keep every single one of us awake at night. Because what happened in that hearing isn't just about Kristi Noem. It isn't just about DHS. And it's not even just about immigration policy. It's about whether the promises written into the Constitution still mean what we say they mean when it's inconvenient to honor them. For generations, Americans have been told that due process is sacred, that it's the thin line between liberty and tyranny, that no matter who you are, where you're from, or how unpopular you might be, the government cannot simply decide your fate behind closed doors. But what Thompson described is a system that has quietly learned how to move faster than the courts, quieter than the press, and colder than the law. A system that knows if it acts quickly enough, confusion becomes policy and accountability becomes optional. Think about that for a second. If the government can deport people before judges can intervene, if it can separate families before lawyers can speak, if it can ignore Supreme Court orders and still operate as if nothing happened, then what exactly is stopping it next time? This isn't fear-mongering. This is pattern recognition. History doesn't usually announce itself with a dramatic collapse. It erodes. It normalizes the unthinkable. It convinces people that outrage is exhausting and that silence is easier. And that's why Thompson's closing statement mattered so much. Because he wasn't just listing violations, he was drawing a line. He was saying, this is where we decide whether the Constitution is real or rhetorical. When American children with cancer can be deported without consent. When court orders can be brushed aside without consequence. When entire agencies meant to protect us from disasters and cyber attacks are hollowed out in service of political optics. That's not strength. That's fragility masquerading as control. And the most dangerous thing about it, it's being done in plain sight. No secret memos. No backroom whispers. Just officials saying the quiet part out loud and daring anyone to stop them. Democracy doesn't survive on autopilot. It survives because people notice moments like this and refuse to treat them as normal. It survives because oversight actually means oversight, not theater, not sound bites, not moving on once the cameras turn off. And here's the truth that's uncomfortable but unavoidable. If this can happen to immigrants, to detainees, to families with no political power, it can happen to anyone once the precedent is set. Rights don't disappear equally. They disappear selectively, until one day you realize the selectivity was just practice. That's why this hearing wasn't just another clip. It was a warning flare. And what happens next depends entirely on whether we treat it like one, or let it fade into the endless noise of the news cycle. If you're still watching, you already know this matters. So don't let it end here. Comment below. Do you think defying court orders should have consequences? Hit like if you believe due process isn't optional. Subscribe if you want more unfiltered breakdowns of what power looks like when it stops being questioned. Because accountability doesn't start in Congress. It starts with people paying attention and refusing to look away.